There's a version of you that never made it out of childhood. Not dead. Just buried. Covered under years of reading the room. Shrinking in conversations. Choosing silence over the risk of saying the wrong thing. And somewhere along the way, you gave that version of you a label. You called it introversion. You made it your identity. You even started to like it. But what if I told you that's not who you are? What if that quietness, that careful distance you keep from the world, wasn't born with you? What if it was built? Brick by brick. In a house you didn't choose. By people you were supposed to trust completely. Here's the thing nobody tells you about personality. Most of it isn't yours. Think about that for a second. The way you hesitate before speaking in a group. The way your chest tightens when someone looks at you expecting an answer. The way you need hours alone just to feel like yourself again after one ordinary social situation. You've probably spent years thinking, that's just how I am. But what if it's actually, that's what I was taught to be? Because children don't arrive guarded. Watch any 3-year-old. They'll walk up to a stranger and start a conversation about nothing. They'll cry in public without embarrassment. They'll say exactly what they feel, exactly when they feel it. There's no filter. No rehearsal. No fear. So where does it go? Something happens. Something quiet. Something that doesn't feel traumatic in the moment, but rewires everything underneath. Maybe it was the look on your father's face when you got excited about something he didn't understand. Maybe it was the way the room went uncomfortable when you cried too long, too loudly. Maybe it was the pattern you noticed early, that when you were less, things went smoother. Less noise. Less reaction. Less you. And somehow, less felt safer. That's the moment the introversion wasn't born. That's the moment it was learned. Psychologists have a concept called the window of tolerance. It's the emotional zone where a person feels safe enough to fully exist. And when children grow up in environments that are unpredictable, critical, or emotionally cold, that window gets smaller. Not because something is wrong with them. Because something was wrong in the environment they had no choice but to adapt to. I want you to sit with that. Because this isn't about blaming your parents. This isn't a story about villains. This is a story about patterns. About how love, even imperfect love, shapes the nervous system of a child who just wanted to feel safe. And that child grew into you. Still scanning rooms. Still choosing your words carefully. Still wondering if you're too much, or somehow, not enough. The answer to that is coming. But first, drop a comment below. Tell me one word that describes how you feel in social situations. I want to know I'm not just talking to a screen. Here's something that will make you uncomfortable. The way you love people right now, the distance you keep, the walls you maintain, the way you wait for others to reach out first, that's not your natural personality. That's your childhood home. Still living inside you. When you're young, your brain isn't just learning words and numbers. It's learning something far more fundamental. It's learning what the world feels like. And the first world you ever knew was your parents. Their moods became your weather forecast. Their silences became your warning system. The tension before dinner. The specific tone of voice that meant you needed to disappear. You didn't study this consciously. Your nervous system did it automatically. Because for a child, reading the emotional temperature of your caregivers isn't curiosity. It's survival. And here's where it gets fascinating. The children who worked hardest to read their environment, those are the people who grow up most perceptive. The ones who notice everything. Who feel everything. Who somehow always know when something is off before anyone speaks. Sound familiar? That's not a gift from nowhere. That's a skill forged in environments where missing a cue had consequences. But survival skills don't always translate well into ordinary life. Because now you're in a conversation with a colleague. And part of your brain is still scanning for threats that don't exist. Tracking micro-expressions. Measuring words before they leave your mouth. calculating how much of yourself is safe to show. And by the end of a normal Tuesday, you're exhausted in a way that's impossible to explain. They ask, "Why are you so tired? You barely did anything. And you don't have the language for it." So you go home. Close the door. And breathe for the first time all day. That's what most people call introversion. But what's actually happening is your nervous system finally stepping down from high alert. You can stop being careful. And you've been careful for so long. Here's the layer almost nobody talks about. When children aren't allowed to express emotions freely, not through punishment, but through dismissal, through "you're too sensitive" and "stop overreacting," they don't stop feeling those emotions. They just stop trusting them. So now you second-guess everything you feel. You want to say something honest, then talk yourself out of it before the moment passes. You've become the editor of your own inner world. That internal censorship isn't maturity. That's a child who learned their emotional reality was inconvenient for the adults around them. And that lesson follows you into every relationship. Every time someone gets close enough to actually let in, something quietly pulls back. Not because you don't want connection. Because you were taught, without words, that being fully known is the same as being fully vulnerable. And vulnerability, in the house you grew up in, wasn't safe. How much of yourself do the people closest to you actually see? That's the pattern. And patterns, no matter how old, can be interrupted. That's exactly where we're going next. Here's the truth nobody prepares you for. Healing doesn't feel like getting louder. It doesn't look like suddenly becoming the person who commands every room, who speaks without hesitation, who never needs silence to recover. That's not the destination. That was never the point. Real healing feels quieter than that. More private. Almost invisible from the outside. It feels like pausing before you shrink and choosing not to. It feels like saying something honest before your brain has time to edit it out. It feels like sitting in a conversation without calculating your exit. Small moments. Barely noticeable to anyone else. But to your nervous system, they're everything. Because every single time you choose expression over self-erasure, your brain registers something new. I spoke. And the world didn't end. That's neuroplasticity working in your favor. The same brain that learned to contract can learn to expand. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But consistently, quietly, in the same way the original conditioning happened. One small moment at a time. But before any of that can begin, something else has to happen first. You have to stop treating your introversion like a permanent diagnosis. Stop wearing it like armor you were born in. Because the moment you say "this is just who I am," you hand your childhood all the power over your future. And your childhood already took enough. This is also the part where forgiveness enters. Not the kind that pretends nothing happened. Not the kind that excuses the dismissals, the emotional coldness, the conditional love that made you feel like you had to earn your place in a room. The kind of forgiveness that simply says, they were also shaped by something they didn't choose. Your parents likely didn't sit down and decide to make you small. They handed you the emotional vocabulary they were given. Silence passed down as strength. Distance passed down as dignity. Control passed down as love. They were children once too, adapting to their own storms. Understanding that doesn't erase your experience. But it stops the inheritance. Because here's what's at stake: if you don't examine this, you carry it forward. Into your relationships. Into the way you parent. Into the way you allow yourself to be loved. The cycle doesn't break itself. You have to choose to become the interruption. And maybe that's the most powerful thing about the introvert who finally understands their own story. You're not just healing yourself. You're ending something generational. You're standing at the edge of a long lineage of silence and saying, "Not anymore." So let me leave you with this. That child who learned to disappear, they weren't weak. They were brilliant. They found a way to survive in an environment that didn't always make space for them. But you're not in that environment anymore. You get to decide what space looks like now. You can be quiet without being absent. Thoughtful without being afraid. Private without being invisible. Your stillness can become intentional instead of defensive. Your depth can become a gift instead of a hiding place. The introversion your parents shaped, you get to reshape it now. Not into something louder. Into something freer. And that freedom, that quiet, unshakable confidence that you exist fully even when you say nothing, that's not the absence of who you were. That's the return of who you always were. Before fear rewrote the story. You're the author now. If this resonated with something you've never had words for before, share it with someone who needed to hear this today. And subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly the kind of person who just watched this entire video. Louder.